Hi, we're going to go over every problem on the ATN Part 1 test that was given on Thursday and Friday of last week. I'm going to go over every problem, but relatively quickly, so you can pause this video if you need to stop it at any point. And if there's any part of the video that you don't want to watch, you can skip over it. I'm going to go in order from 1 to 20 and the bonus problem. So you'll see every part of the test that you need to see, and feel free to stop the video at any point and forward to the part that you want to go over. Okay, we're going to start with number 1. Number 1 on the test was -15 minus 12, and you weren't necessarily supposed to just find the answer. You had to find the equivalent expression. -15 minus 12 is an expression that starts at 15 below 0 and ends somewhere else. We're subtracting 12. So if we start at 15 below 0 and we subtract 12, that means we're going to get even further away from 0. So if you think of that on a number line, 15 would be 15 below 0, it would be that way to the left, and then you're subtracting 12, so you're going further that way. So let's look at what some of these expressions show us here, the options that we had. We had 4 choices. This was a multiple choice problem. -15 plus 12. We know that's not the same expression as -15 minus 12 because we're starting at the same point and we have 2 different operations. This one's subtracting 12, so it's going to be less. This one's adding 12, so it's going to be more. So we know that's not it. This one starts at 12 and subtracts a -15. So this is a contender because we don't know what its total value is until we calculate it. So let's calculate these two to see if they're close. So if we start at -15 and we subtract 12, that's getting less. So if we start at -15 and we subtract 10, that's going to be -25. We subtract 2 more, that gets us to -27. So I'm just going to write -27 right there. That's our answer to this. That's the value of -15 minus 12. So one of these remaining 3 has to have that same value in order to be equivalent. And this one doesn't, because we're starting at 12 above 0. That's a positive 12. We're subtracting a negative, so that's actually going to get even greater. This one has a value of positive 27. So that one can't be it. We've canceled this one out. We know that this one isn't it because it has a different operation. This one would have a total value of -3. This one has a value of positive 27, and we need something with a value of -27. 15 minus 12, those are both positive numbers. That gives us a value of +3, so we know that's not it. So it must be D. It must be the 4th one. -15, we're starting at the same place, plus -12. When you add a negative, you are also decreasing in value. So this gets us to -27, just like number 1 did. Okay, so that's number 1. I'm gonna stop there. If you need to pause the video and go over that again, feel free to, but I'm gonna move on to number 2. Okay, number 2 is -3/4 is either equal to, greater than, or less than -0.34 or 34 hundredths. That would be -34 hundredths. So we have to determine which one of these is greater than the other. And there were a few errors on this problem. There are 3 possible choices. And so I'm not even sure if some of those people who got it right just by chance or because they knew what was the right answer. In this case, we have -3/4. That's actually closer to -1. It's a negative value, so that means it's less than 0. It's closer to -1 than this one, -34 hundredths. -34 hundredths is actually closer to 0 than -0.5. And -0.5 is only a half. That's halfway between 0 and -1. This one is even closer to -1. So this one has a lesser value. That means that it is less than -34 hundredths. If we were to put that on a number line, it would look something like this. It would look, there's our number line. I'm going to put 0 over here because we're talking about negatives. So there's 0 and there's -1. So -3/4 is, if here's halfway between 0 and negative 1, that would be negative 0.5. Negative 3/4 is all the way over here, negative 3/4. Negative 0.34 is going to be over here somewhere, close to 1/3, right? That would be negative 1/3, and which is really close to negative 0.34 or 34/100. So let's put that right there. And now we can see that this is less than, it's further away from 0, and this is greater than that. So we have negative 3/4 is less than negative 34/100. Okay, moving on to number 5. Again, feel free to stop the video and go back and watch that one again, or continue for the rest of the problems. That's number 5. We skipped number 3 and 4. So let's look at number 3 and 4 on the test. Right here. Here we have 3 and 4. These have this one has a number line, so I wanted to actually use the test for this. I hope you can see that okay. Looks like it. So here we have the number line. The problem is negative 0.8 plus negative 1.7. And that gives us a total of negative 2.5. And we have to show that on here. And so if you don't know what that total is, you can always use a number line as an algorithm. Find negative 0.8 on the number line. That's almost at negative 1. So here's 0. We went over here. So that's our starting point right there. Negative 0.8 or negative 0.8, right? Almost all the way over to 1. And then we're adding a negative 1.7. So that means we're going that way. We're decreasing in value. If we added a positive, we'd go up, but we're adding a negative, so we're going to go down. We're going to decrease in value. So that means we have to bounce from here. There's a 1, and then here's the 0.7. Negative 1 and 0.7. So negative 1.7 leaves us halfway between negative 2 and negative 3. How do we know exactly that that's negative 2.5 and not negative 2.4 or negative 2.6? Well, if we take these absolute values, because we know we're starting, if we started at 0 to get to negative 0.8, that's an absolute value of 0.8, and then we add the absolute value of 0.7 to that, it's like saying 0.8 plus 0.7, and that's 2.5. And since we're in the negatives, we know that it's going to be negative 2.5. So that's what a completed number 3 looks like. Negative 0.8 plus negative 1.7 equals negative 2.5, and it shows this using the humps on the number line. All right, that's number 3. You can see that number 4 is here also. This was rewriting fractions from least to greatest. I think the most common error here was that some folks actually wrote it from greatest to least, but we started with negative 5/4. If you wrote that as negative 1 1/4, that was fine. Negative 1/3, 2 1/4, and 13/3. If you wrote that as 4 1/3, that's fine also. But that was the correct order of number 4. All right, now we can move on to number 5, which is right here. This was that equation that we explored on 2 different problems on the test. It was number 5 and also on the bonus, which we'll get to shortly. N minus negative 11 equals 24. Now, the directions for this one simply said to, I'm going to read them directly, write a related number sentence for the following, or write a related equation for the following. So you didn't have to solve for n, you had to write a related number sentence, and we know that related refers to fact families. So if this minus this equals that, we want to rewrite this so it can represent a true statement with these same values, 24, negative 11, and n. And n has to stay the same, negative 11 has to stay the same, and 24 has to stay the same. There were a number of errors on this problem. Let's see what this means first of all. So when you're subtracting a negative, you're increasing in value. So it's kind of like saying n plus 11 equals 24. But we have to remember this is expressed using subtraction and a negative sign. So even though it's the same thing as saying n plus 11 equals 24, it's expressed as n minus negative 11 equals 24. So we have to use this negative 11, that 24, and this n in our related sentence or equation. Okay, so let's see if we can write a new one that starts with 24. 24, now if we were to see this as n plus 11 equals 24, we'd know that n is 13. N represents 13, and that ends up being the bonus question, by the way. But some people put n equals 13 here and didn't write anything else. You didn't get credit for this problem because that's not a related number sentence. That's just solving for n. But if we see that as 13, then we know that whatever we do with, say, negative 11, it has to result in n, which we know represents 13. So 24, and then we have this negative 11 here. Something negative 11 equals n. Well, if we subtract it, then that's going to give us positive 35, because if you subtract a negative 11, it's going to go up in value, and so that's not going to be any good. So we have to add negative 11. When we add a negative, it's like subtracting. So 24 minus 11 equals 13. So this is a fact family member for n minus negative 11 equals 24. So if we call this A, and this B, and this C, then we can restate that in any way that we want. So C, right, here's C, minus, and this was B, equals A. So that should be true then about, if we take C and subtract A, that should also equal B. Let's see if we can rearrange it that way as well. So C, we decided was n. We're going to subtract A, 24, and that should equal negative 11. And it does. 13 minus 24 equals negative 11. So this works, and this works for fact family members. That's number 5 for us. Okay. Again, feel free to pause the video, rewind and watch it again, or continue on to the next item, which is, let's see, we had number 6, I think. Yeah. Let's look at number 6 on the number line here. I'm just going to kind of show you part of the test right here so that you can see. This was find the distance between negative 10 and 17 on a number line. And a number of people actually got this right but didn't write the number. And since it says find the distance, we need to know what that number is. Now some people just did this part. They found 17 on the number line, and they found negative 10 on the number line, and they shaded or did humps or drew something to indicate that there was space here, but they didn't tell us what the number was. So I couldn't give you credit if you didn't have that number 27 there. Some folks miscounted and had a 26 or a different number, but what you really needed to show was something on the number line and the number 27 for your answer on here. The distance between negative 10 and 0 is 10, and then the distance between 0 and 17 is 17, so you're basically adding 10 and 17, the absolute values, and you get 27. Okay, so now we're going to look at the part of the test that I think most people had errors on, and that was those 8 problems that each counted as a point, 19 minus 26, and so on. Let's see if we can determine the answers here. So we started with 19 minus 26. This was number 7. 19 minus 26, so you're starting at above 0 and you're subtracting a larger number, and that means you're going to end up below 0. The difference between these two numbers is 7. So when you start at 19 and you subtract 26, you're going to end up with a negative 7. This one, 12 plus negative 9. When you start with a 12 and you add a negative, doesn't matter what number you start with, if you're adding a negative, your value is going to go down. So if we're starting at 12, it's going to go down from 12. So it's like saying 12 minus 9. And 12 minus 9 is 3. So when you add a negative 9 from 12, you get 3. And that's a positive 3. going to circle these because we should circle our answers on tests, right? -7 minus -9. Now we're starting at 7 below 0, and we're subtracting a -9. So that's like adding. When you subtract a negative, you're increasing in value. When you add a negative, you're decreasing in value. It's all about that negative there, isn't it? So when you're subtracting a negative, you're actually increasing in value. So -7 minus -9, you're going to be going up from -7, and that's going to give you a +2. And this one, this is number 8 here. Whoops, nope, this is number 9. Sorry, we're going out of order. And this one was number 11. This one was a key to one of the true or false questions right here. Let's go back and try to go in order here. So we started with 19 minus 26 and that equals -7. Then we have 26 minus 19. And that's just those are two positive numbers. And so that gives us a +7, right? The difference between 26 and 19 is 7. So that one wasn't too tricky. Then we had 12 plus -9 is 3. -12 minus -9. Again, we're starting at -12 and now we're increasing in value. We're going up toward 0. But we're not going to get all the way to 0 because 9 is less than 12. So we're going to get only part way to 0 from -12. And that gives us a -3. Right? So we start at 12 below 0. We subtract -9 degrees. That's like adding 9 degrees. And it gets us to -3. Then we had -7 minus -9. That brought us up past 0 to 2. And now we have -9 minus -7. So we're, once again, subtracting a negative. Let's just look at a number line here just to see exactly what we mean by that. Okay, so here's the 0. And let's say -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, -8, -9, -10. Okay, so we're going to start at -9 and we're subtracting -7. Now if we were just subtracting 7, we'd go this way and we'd go further away from 0, -9, -10, -11, -12, and so on. But we're not, we're subtracting negatives. So we're going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right here to -2. You can see that's 2 spaces away from 0. So our answer here is -2. Okay, and finally the last two, -7 plus -9. -7 plus -9. Now we're going in the other direction. We're starting at -7 and we are adding -9, so it's like subtracting. We're going from -7 down, we're losing value away from 0. -7 minus -9. So that's going to give us -16. If we added -10, we would end up with -17, but we're adding -9, so we end up with -16 for our answer here. 7 plus -9 is starting above 0 and adding a negative, so that's like subtracting 9, and so we're going to end up below 0 at -2 again. So those were the answers to those 4 questions. Those 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Those 8 problems. Okay, moving on. We are now at the back part of the test. Actually, nope, we have the true or false questions to look at. Here are the true or false questions. The sum of 2 negative numbers is always negative. So if you're starting with a negative number and you're adding another negative number, then you have to always end up with a negative value because it's going to get further away from 0 in the negative direction. So that will always be negative. Now, the sum of a positive number and a negative number is always negative. That's not true because it depends which one of those has a greater absolute value. If the positive number, say 9, and the negative number is, say, -5, then your answer is going to be positive because -9 plus -5 is +4. It's like saying 9 minus 5. Okay, so this one is false. That's not true. It's not always negative. This one, the difference, that's the answer to a subtraction problem, of two negative numbers is always negative. That's why I used number 11 as an example. Here's two negative numbers, and they're being subtracted from each other. We're starting at -7, and we subtract a number with a greater absolute value. Subtracting -9, that's going to end up with a positive answer. So we know that this is false. Number 17 is false. This is the one I think that had the most wrong answers of all of them. A negative number minus a positive number is always negative. That's true, because you're subtracting a positive number, so it's going to continue to go down. This is almost the same thing as number 15. It's always going to be negative. If you start negative and you subtract a positive number, that means your value is going to get even lower. So it has to be negative. That's a true statement. Okay, so 15, 16, 17, 18 were true, false, false, true, and that's why. Okay, moving on, we have just a couple of more items here. I'll just show you the test. We have number 19, which was has an open dot. I think I'm going to zoom. Well, I think you can see that pretty clearly on the video. There's an open dot there. There we go. Zoom in a little bit. That is an open dot on -1 because this says x is less than -1. It does not say x is equal to, so that means x can't be -1. It can't be -1 and less than -1 at the same time. So x is less than -1 has to start with an open dot to represent that x can't be that number. And then since it's less than, we're going to shade everything less than -1. So everything to the left side on the number line is less than. So we shade this part of the number line, or darken the number line, and we use an open dot. This one down here is already graphed for us. There's a closed dot on -2, and everything to the right of that is shaded. So that means x is greater than or equal to, because it's a closed dot, so x actually can be -2 in this case, or it could be greater than -2. So we darken that number, put a dot right on -2, and we darken the rest side. We shade the rest of the right side of the number line. We darken the rest of that number line. Okay, so x is greater than or equal to -2 is the inequality for that. A couple of people asked what is an inequality, inequality is any expression, instead of an equal sign, it has a greater than or less than sign, or a greater than or equal to sign, or greater than or less than or equal to sign. But it doesn't have just an equal sign. If it has an equal sign, then that makes it an equation, or an equality, and this is an inequality. Okay, because they're not equal to each other. All right, and lastly, the bonus question, n minus -11 equals 24. What is the value of n? Well, we figured that out by making sure that we knew that n minus -11 is the same thing as saying n plus 11 equals 24. And if we subtract 11 from 24, we can determine that n equals 13. And there were a few other possible answers that people had expressed that were not correct. I think 35 was the most common one. If you add 11 and 24, you get 35, but not if it's negative. If it's negative, you get 13. So n minus -11 is like adding 11 to this number. So if you take 13, add 11 to it, you get 24. So that's how we ended up with n equals 13. All right, long video, I know, but thank you for sticking it out. And remember, you can go back and rewatch any of these if you need to.